everyone, to our Pinoy Nurse podcast. We are showcasing inspiring stories of Filipino nurses worldwide. And today I've got my special guest, Dr. Rei Serafica. I'm very excited to start this series with you.
Thank you, Irene. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me to this podcast.
We're very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So, you've pioneered the concept of dietary biculturalism. Can you tell us how your Filipino roots influence your interest in this area and what you've learned about how culture affects the health of immigrant communities?
Absolutely. Thank you, Irene, for that question. Growing up in the Philippines, I grew up in Cubao, Quezon City. Being uh, we're not really a large family, we're a small family, but we have lots and lots of relatives. So food was always more than just a nutrition. It was a connection. It's a culture. It gives us comfort, right? So when I moved to the US and when I started doing my PhD dissertation, actually I started with dietary acculturation. I want to study how the Filipino immigrants for first generation, changed their dietary habits when they come into the United States. But then I also noticed how immigrant families, including mine, struggled to balance that so-called traditional Filipino foods with our Western dietary guidelines. So that tension really sparked my interest. Through my research, I saw how culture plays a huge role in health behaviors. And it's not just about telling people to eat healthy. Sometimes you have to understand where they're coming from. The memory is tied to the food, their access to the food itself, and the values when they prepare or when they eat those types of food. And I would say the struggle is real, especially for first generation parents and even the second generation kids. You're trying to raise your families in the Western world while keeping the cultural traditions alive. So food is the heart of that, and that's always this question. Do we keep cooking the way your parents did, or do we try to modify the recipes to be healthier? Is it still adobo if I don't use much soy sauce or pork fat, And these are the type of questions that Filipino families are asking every day. So part of my work in dietary biculturalism is saying, yes, you can make those small changes without losing the essence of our food. And it's about, finding that balance and it's like honoring our heritage while making choices that support your health in this new environment or in a new country.
Wow, I think that's so cool for me as well. I would consider myself as a second generation immigrant,
Mhm.
and the importance of my dad's cooking, and
Yes.
just the comfort of that, right? But also to share that with other people from other cultures on what that's like. And I think that the essence is trying to maintain that identity when you go to a new country.
Mhm. And the thing is, like, we're so focused on how to modifying the Western diet to make it healthy. Why not do that to immigrants, original or what we call native food as well?
Mm.
Because there is always this perception that, oh, you came from Asia, your food must be healthy. Well, not all, right? As we know,
Yes.
right? We have, like, yeah. So we need to focus on those because there's always that big correlation, of course, between diet and our physical or health outcomes, right? Chronic diseases and things like that. So this is actually the best time, to do it and to educate our fellow kababayans about what we can do to make our food healthier.
Wow. If you were to speak to a family right now who've just immigrated or they're now in the US and they're trying to figure this out, what would be the first step that you would advise them to do?
So one of the things is like to read labels, so because like here in the US, our kababayans can, and I'm sure, where you at as well, they have access to the Filipino ingredients, right? And they also have access to the other food. So what I would always recommend is like, there is a version of soy sauce that's less sodium.
Mm,
There is a version of the full sugar that is not real sugar, but you can use that as a replacement, to bake your cake or do your banana fritters, right? And just by simply educating them to do that, then they will say, "Oh, yeah, I didn't even realize that." Right? Because I work in primary care as well as a mental health professional, and sometimes they struggle about um, they say, "Hey, I'm eating the same food. How come I'm gaining weight?" Right?
mm,
So yeah, so we'll say, so we have to talk about it,
yes,
and I said, okay, so tell me, what type of food do you eat, and who prepares the food, and what do you do to those ingredients? And there's always an opportunity to educate.
100%, definitely. Uh, on a personal level as well, Ray, I think I did a fitness competition back in the
Mm,
day. And I missed Filipino food and rice. I was trying to find a way to uh, still have a healthy lifestyle, but also still enjoy Filipino food. So, for example, like beef steak, instead of
right.
the,
Yeah.
it's pure Seven Up or Sprite, we would choose the no sugar version of it, just
Mhm.
to have a level of sweetness but still keep to the flavor. So I think that's some small swapping is a good idea.
Yes, yes, and you can still retain that memory or that culture that's been part of uh, that food preparation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
As a Filipino nurse who has built a successful academic and research career in the US, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in that transition and how did you overcome them?
Oh gosh, wow, there were many. So, one of the biggest was feeling like I had to prove myself constantly. And I'm sure some of our kababayans feel the same way. So, coming from the Philippines, I sometimes felt or what I call underestimated, especially early in my career.
Hmm.
There were moments of self-doubt. We call it the imposter syndrome. It's real, but I stayed grounded by reminding myself why I was here, and maybe to give back, maybe to help others, maybe to teach, to mentor, and to represent our community in spaces where we're often underrepresented. So also, as Filipinos, we're known to be incredibly hardworking, right? But we can also be quiet. We are humble and not as assertive as we sometimes need to be, especially in high competitive environments. And I learned how to advocate for myself, like really to speak up and ask for what is right and fair. So that wasn't always easy, but for me, it was necessary. I realized that if I didn't claim my space at that given time, no one else was going to offer it to me, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I want other Filipino nurses to know it's okay to honor our values and still push for equity and visibility. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think coming back to your pioneering research about biculturalism and diet, was there any instance during that journey that you had to push yourself to speak up to overcome the imposter syndrome?
Oh yes, the couple of times, because like well, the good thing about being a Filipino is like you have the integrity really to teach, what you know, because you know the culture very well, right? So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the question, or the always the challenge of why are you the expert? And you have to prove yourself that I did my research, I passed my comms, I publish in this, I got grants, and I have some good outcomes to share. And I have disseminated this not only to regional but also to international audience. And I have the expertise really to teach this or to share this information. So I think when we have that in our core,
Mm-hmm.
um, so whatever we work hard, for whatever it is, then we need to claim it, and we need to tell the world that that here's my contribution to science, and this is how I advance this field.
Yeah. That's so inspirational, I think, for any Filipino or Pinoy nurse that's listening in who feels like it's hard for them to speak up or to stand their ground. I think sharing your examples have hopefully will encourage them to do the same for their own space, to claim their space.
Yes, and mentorship too. Like I met a lot of great Filipino mentors, not only in academia but also in healthcare system, and that's what we need to do. We need to inspire each other and mentor each other, because then we can do great things when our numbers are bigger.
Yes, the impact of a mentor 100% really helps.
Correct.
So, this transitions quite nicely to the next question. You've been actively involved in mentoring PhD and DNP students. What advice would you give Filipino nurses aspiring to pursue advanced studies or to move into academic leadership?
Oh, I'll say go for it. Don't wait to feel ready, because just take the leap. I always tell my students, especially the Filipino students, that guys, we have so much to offer. Our compassion, our work ethic, our live experiences, of our parents. The academic world needs diverse voices like us, and we can keep waiting for someone to invite us in. We have to find mentors, build our community, and don't be afraid to speak up. Also, keep writing, keep publishing, and don't be shy away from leadership. You belong there. All of us belong there. And honestly, Irene, it really thrills me when I find out that leaders in academia or practice or even in services are Filipinos, because when I see Filipinos in the chief executive officer positions or the chief nursing officer roles or even deans or associate deans or director position, I mean, I'm thrilled. Like, I always tell myself, this is fantastic. It's a reminder that we already making an impact, and we should absolutely use the visibility to mentor each other. Let's reach back and recruit the younger generation to always aspire to do the same. And also, there is that installation, right? We instill in them early the importance of pursuing advanced practice degrees and stepping into academic or leadership roles. Representation matters, and the more of us who rise, the more we can uplift our community as a whole in general.
Yeah, I think that's really great to be offering an opportunity to have mentors, to actually have role models to see how it could actually happen.
And that diversity, especially, if you're pursuing an advanced practice, like you will be a future provider, or you will be a provider, and you don't know how many Filipinos are really looking for providers that look like them, that speak like them, that really understand them. I mean, that
Yeah.
alone it can really, is a facilitator to even better health outcomes. People don't realize it, but same is true in academia. Like students who would like to enroll or major in nursing, they would look at the number of faculty who looks like them, right? Or who can mentor them to give them guidance. I mean, I think that's really, really important. So representation is a good thing.
100%, particularly when in our healthcare scenarios or our where we're at right now, there's so many Filipino frontliners. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they're probably some of them, they're probably wanting to stay there, which is fine. But
Mm-hmm.
some want to advance their careers in some way or form, and having someone that looks like them gives
Mm-hmm.
them hope to say, hey, I could actually give this a go.
Yes, yes, and of course, especially if you speak the language or you understand, the patient. I mean, the more they, that's really an automatic trust
Hmm.
that they don't get, like if the providers are not from their own country or not from the same ethnicity. I mean, that's really important.
Yeah. I'm curious a little bit more. This is a slightly different question outside of the questions I've provided, but how did you get started with your own practice?
Oh yeah, each nurse has his or her own journey, right? So
Hmm.
actually started in medical ICU, believe it or not. I like critical care. I That was for me. When I was starting. That's really my goal is to be a critical care nurse, to work in ICU. I like the complexity of the diseases and the acuity of the patient, but at the same time, I also realized that mental health is really important. And, I would say half of my patients that I took care of, they
Mm.
had mental health issues. And I made a mission to myself that I said, hey, what if I can contribute to that? What if I can prevent, people from mental health sufferings, or even help them manage, their symptoms
Mm.
or treatment. Because mental health is health, right? And it's not something that that we can measure. It's not like a blood pressure that if you
Yes.
are more than 120 over 80, then you'll say, okay, you have a high blood pressure. How do you do that in mental health? Right? And it really affects a lot. It affects the quality of life of the person, relationships, work, people around them. And it became my mission really to help others. So from nursing administration, so my first master was actually in nursing administration because I want to lead, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, I was 50-50 to mental health. So I took another master and become of psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. So right now, I started in inpatient, seeing inpatient mental health patients inside the hospital, and then I transitioned to outpatient because I really like the idea of prevention.
Hmm.
So I don't want these patients to go back to inpatient. So what can I do? So have to manage them in outpatient settings, and it's been rewarding. I really like it. And from that, I build network, and then I always educate the community about the mental health and how important it is, especially in our kababayans,
Yes.
fellow Filipinos. So that's something that I live for.
Yeah, and to me, I imagine you're probably getting a lot of Filipinos to talk about mental health within your communities. Do you do this over food? How do you entice people to start talking about mental health when there's still a little bit of a stigma that surrounds it?
Yeah, so there is like, this is something that you don't just, like talk over Thanksgiving dinner, right? Uh, but yeah, this is something I encounter every time I'm in, or even, if even if I'm not in practice. I've learned that approaching mental health in our culture, takes a lot of patience or
Mm,
pasensya, right?
yep.
A lot of empathy. I often start by normalizing, and I think that's very important, emotional struggles as something human, not a weakness or a punishment. I use the language that resonates, like, "Are you tired?" or "Pagod ang isip," or something like that first.
Mm,
Because
mm-mm.
like when you say, "Are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you suicidal?" No, they cannot take that, right? But if you normalize it in our language and culture, sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, my brain feels really tired, and I have this fatigue that I can't explain." So
Mm,
instead of clinical labels that might scare people, I use, our language. Also, I involve the family when it's appropriate, because healing often happens in a collective space for
yeah.
us, especially for Filipinos. Once you explain to the family that this is what is happening, then, as a family, they tend to help that patient or their family
Mm,
member. It's also crucial that we educate our kababayans
mm,
that, like I mentioned before, that mental health is health. It affects our overall, quality of life, ability to work, our physical health, and how we show up in the world. The sooner we recognize that, the sooner we can break that stigma. And another thing, I always make it clear that not all mental health issues require medication, because people are
that's
so
right.
afraid of that. Some people are afraid to seek help because they think they'll automatically be prescribed of something. But
Yeah.
many concerns can be expressed to, as we know, through therapy, maybe lifestyle changes or other non-pharmacological approaches, right? So the key is to get help early and find what works best for you.
Yes.
Then we just need to create more safe spaces for those conversations to begin.
Yeah. In your practice, Ray, without delving into confidentiality, of course, in your practice, who sees you the most? As in, who are the demographics that are willing to talk about mental health more readily, and what populations are more challenging that you know they need it, but it's really hard to get get them to give them help, or they ask for help. I don't know if that makes any sense,
Yeah,
but yeah.
that makes sense. So I practice my practice is lifespan, right? I see kids, and I see older adults, right? So it depends on the ethnicity, but for mostly for Filipinos, the kids and, I would say even the adults,
Mm-hmm.
are okay. Like, now they're getting more, um I would say, they're accepting that mental health issues can be a barrier to their quality of life, and they will recognize it, and they will be more open. The older adults, is still, we need to work on that, because our titos and titas, the moms and dads, when they get to their age, they grew up in a society and culture that mental health is a sign of weakness, and they would deny
Mm,
it, right? They say, oh no, I'm not depressed. But I said, but you've been isolating yourself for days. Yeah,
Yeah.
but for them, that's not a sign of mental health issue. So that is one of the things that we are working on. Actually, I had another researcher with me. We're developing a tool or instrument to screen depression among older adults, Filipino older adults. So how can we make this? How can we normalize this? Just like that conversation part that I was introducing before, how can we make them feel that it's okay to be depressed, it's okay to be anxious, it's okay to accept that you have sleeping problems, right? That can be a manifestation of something else, right?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
or even loss of appetite, or even things that you were enjoying before, now you don't find meanings in that. And there are multi-factors, reasons why people would undergo that kind of phase. It could be a retirement. They're not doing anything else anymore. It could be the family is so far away from them. They miss their grandkids, they miss their children. Now they're just like living on their own.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we really need to work on as Filipinos, especially if we live in foreign lands. And how can we make that better for everybody?
Yeah. For those that are listening in, I can imagine that most of us listening are having family members, older family members that perhaps may need some help in some way. What would you advise our Pinoy nurses to say? What would be the next step if you find that their family members who are much older might need mental health support? What could that be?
Okay, so one thing that I always advocate is, like, especially if you have already a healthcare background, is really to ask pertinent questions, like, talk about loneliness, or talk about being sad, or talk about being impulsive sometimes, or any physical manifestation like no energy at all, and why do you think, what's the reason for that,
Mm-hmm.
and start to connect things, right? Because it could be just, especially for older adults, they're taking a lot of medications, and sometimes those are just side effects. But I always ask the family members to really start referring them to mental health professionals, and so that they can have a better assessment, and we can diagnose them the earlier the better,
Yep.
because yeah, and in that way they'll start feeling better, or they start talking to somebody, or even if they don't want to take medications, we can always give them other means on
Yes.
how to cope, or give them a better coping mechanism tools, that they can use when they're having these symptoms. And it can be longer, it can be shorter, depending on the situations they're
Mhm.
in. But always be aware, check on our relatives, check on our families, always. If they're not calling you for a couple of days, but they used to do that, maybe we need to check on them. Or sometimes, especially for the Filipino culture, they will deny everything, that they don't have mental health, but they start drinking more, or even
Mm.
using other substance, right? And that can be, those are manifestations of there is something going on in the brain, that they're using a different type of coping mechanism
Yeah.
to resolve that.
Yeah. Well, those are
So,
some really good pieces of advice. Not only is it, you have to question differences in their behavior, and the
mhm.
importance of referral. I think that's really crucial for our kababayan.
Yes, definitely.
Now, I think I'll have another question for you, Ray. it's something I like to think about on a day-to-day basis, and I ask myself that every now and again, and that is, what inspires you on a daily basis? What keeps you going?
Oh my gosh, there are too many things, Irene. But I always find meanings in my projects and what I do and what I want to do. You know, and sometimes when they talk, I know it's cliche when we say we want to make things better, a little bit better, but that's really the reason why I'm here. I think if I can just like invent like a magic pill to make everybody happy, I would have done it, right? But it doesn't work that way. But making meanings, even just for small conversation, even for a smaller project, that you think that, hey, this piece, a little piece of research, maybe I'm only studying like 100 people, but for those 100 people, maybe 80% of that will have that meaning and value for them, in the long run. Or even when you deliver that lecture to your inspiring nursing students, right? How can I make this more realistic and more applicable? Because when you teach, like you're also in academia, we want folks to listen to us so that they can apply that knowledge right away. They don't
Yes.
have to wait for another, year or so before they can transition that knowledge. So we want it right away so that they can touch more lives. I also like to make sure that um, not only folks will get inspiration from me, but I also want to be inspired constantly by people who dedicated their work and their life, not only to science, but to kindness, to positivity,
Yes.
to really give that energy to a lot of people, because that makes a lot of difference. Even when you try to make somebody comfortable in any capacity or any level, I mean, that means a lot to that person, especially if they're going through hard times. So yeah, just that little ball of energy that will touch people. I mean, but there are days too that I'll tell myself when I wake up. I said, "Hey, I need help," and be able to recognize that too. I think that's humbling, because everybody is vulnerable.
Yes.
Everybody needs help, right? So by recognizing that, I think you're giving examples that we need each other, to
Yes.
survive or to thrive.
Yes, absolutely. I resonate totally with everything that you've just mentioned. The nature of nursing and being in academia is having an opportunity to influence, but also be influenced by and be inspired by those around you. I think nursing is such a special field of work that allows us to give, but also to receive. So,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Agree 100%.
Ray, I've got one last question that we would like to ask all our Pinoy nurses around the world, and particularly for you as our guest. What is one piece of advice or wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Oh man. All right. So I'll say keep your roots, your ugat strong, but don't be afraid to grow in new directions. We carry so much wisdom and knowledge from our culture, from our heritage, and that's real strength. I will say use it, be bold, be visible, and know that wherever you are in the world, you represent the best of what Filipino nurses can offer. Also, I would say, be authentic in your goals. Don't pursue something just because others have done it and it looks very impressive. Do it because it aligns with your values and what your core stands for. And find that inspiration, the inspiration that we were talking earlier from others, but make sure your journey stays true to you. When your path is rooted in purpose, I believe it becomes more meaningful, not
Mhm.
just for yourself, but for the people you'll uplift along the way.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you so much. That is amazing. Ray, thank you again for your time, your wisdom, your kindness, your energy, and for sharing everything today in this podcast. Everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast today. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories here at the Pinoy Nurse Podcast. This is Irene Mayo. Thank you so much. Bye.